welcome to ABC of Storytelling 2.0. My name is Rituparna Ghosh, and every week I share tips, tricks, techniques and secrets from my story bag, helping you with stories and storytelling. ABC of Storytelling 2.0 is a special series for coaches, trainers, consultants, entrepreneurs, professionals, businesses and anyone who wants to harness the power of stories step by step. We are on the letter D and I can't wait to get started. The first D that I have for you today is details. And to talk about details, I have to demonstrate it with a story. But before I begin my story, I want you to go and grab a paper and a pen. Now here's what you have to do. As I tell my story, identify the fine details in my story and write them down. You can doodle them, you can scribble on your paper, but make a list of all the details that are there in my story. I still remember the first day of grade 3. I remember it as clearly as if it happened yesterday. I went to a convent school, and every year we went through that painful exercise of being shuffled. We didn't like it, but with time we learned to live with it. So there I was in the first day of grade 3. We assembled in the school playground because that's where the first assembly would happen. The teachers would then call out their names and would segregate the children into their classes. So a teacher would come on to the mic and she would say 3A and da-da-da, 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 da-da. She would name all the girls and suddenly all of us would gather around and get into a new file. So 3A, 3B, 3C, we went on. And once the names were called out, once we were divided into our separate sections, we marched up. Yes, grade 3 was also special because that was the year when we moved from the lower ground floor to the first floor. Now it felt like we were big girls because grade 1 and grade 2 were supposed to be on the ground floor, and grade 3 and 4 would be on the next floor, and grade 5, which is when primary school ended, you were on the topmost story of the primary block. And it meant that you are gradually growing higher and higher, bigger and bigger. So there we were in grade 3, felt very important. New uniform, freshly pressed, socks pulled up, shoes polished. There we were shuffling with our school bags and our notebooks neatly covered inside. Now that was the year I remember very clearly. I got to write my name on the label by myself. It was a big task because by grade 3, you had somewhat a neat handwriting and your parent allowed you to write. And I remember that very clearly about my freshly wrapped notebooks and textbooks. So there we were, we walked up the corridor talking to each other. I don't remember who were my classmates in that year, but I do remember this day and remember everything around it. But I very strangely don't remember all the faces that were there in my section. But that's not important. So we walked up the stairs and we walked down the corridor, and the class, the section A was first, then B and C. Our room was third room on the corridor. And we walked in, and you can imagine a big bunch of girls walking in, rushing into the class, trying to hold on to some friend's hand and trying to find a seat which would be their lucky seat for the year. So I walked in with somebody, and the first row right after entering the room, I walked in. And we were made to sit in pairs. So there were wooden desks and benches, and the first pair, second pair, third pair, fourth pair, and there was another desk behind me, I remember. So I was on the fourth desk, and very eagerly we sat down and we put our bags between us. 2 girls sitting side by side, we put our bag between us and we were ready for class. And that's when our teacher walked in. She walked in and she climbed onto the platform, she sat down and she took our attendance. Now that's as much of the story that I will tell today. I have told this story several times, many times over, at different places and at different times for different audiences. This story is about fear and my fear of numbers and how I'm intimidated with numbers. And the story is about how maths really flew out of my head on this particular day. Now, if you have written down all the details, I want you to look at it and see whether you have the details of grade 3, first day, assembly, playground, roll call, stairs, school bag, school uniform, notebooks. Do you write all these fine little things which I have put into my story? If you have, then you have got it right. You have got exactly what I wanted you to note about details. A story is made up of details, tiny bits which make your listener tune into your story, lean in to listen to your story, and also the same details which help the listener visualize the story in their head. Did you imagine me walking to school? Did you imagine yourself walking to school? Did you imagine your own playground? Did you imagine me in a playground? Did you imagine me standing with a group of girls? Did you imagine me carrying a school bag? Well, if you did, then it was all because of the tiny details that I have in my story. Details in a story are important not only because you want your listener to tune in and listen to you and visualize you in that story, in that narrative, but it is also important because the details carry the crux of the matter, of why the story is important, of why the story is meaningful for you. This is a story which I said is about my fear of numbers, and while I tell this story, I put in more details about how I struggled with the subject, how I would fear the subject so much that it made me underperform every time I had to take an exam. I also put in details about various parts of my life where I have struggled with numbers and what it has made me do or how it has made me react to different situations in my life. Now, details in a story really give you the entire picture. Details in a story help you convey the very meaning or the emotion or the crux of the matter that you are trying to convey to your listener. Never, never, never ignore the details. Never, never, never put in more details than that are required. Remember, a story should not be very wordy. A story should be just appropriate with just the amount of details that make the story relatable and something which the listener connects to. The second D that I have for you today is dialogue. I love direct speech or active voice in a story. No matter which story I'm trying to tell, or even if it's an anecdote, I try to put in a dialogue in it. A dialogue makes the listener sit up and meet a character in your story quite directly. Now, in the story that I was just telling you, I could say that the teacher walked down from the platform and she asked us to take out our maths notebooks. But I could also do it a little differently. I could say the teacher got up from the desk, she walked down with a clack from the platform, she walked up to the first bench, she looked at the class and said, "Take out your maths notebooks." Now this dialogue from the teacher is very, very important because that's where the story really begins. Now, it may look like a leaf out of my performance storytelling persona, but really, when I tell this dialogue, it tells everybody that something is about to happen. Something is going to finally happen in the story and the story is going to begin because that's why she's telling that story. It is this dialogue that really gets people to lean in and listen, or rather concentrate or follow the story even if they had clued out or were not listening until now. Highlighting dialogues or putting a dialogue into your story really pulls the listener back into your narrative. It tells the listener that something is about to happen, that it's important to listen, that there is a reason why the teller, that is you, who has put in this dialogue in the story. Now, why is this important? Imagine you are talking about or sharing a feedback from your customer, or it could be a piece of advice that your senior gave to you when you started your career. Or it could also be a part of an exchange of a conversation that you overheard and are now sharing with others and talking about why are you telling that particular story. A dialogue is a very important tool. So try and put in a dialogue, try and put in an active voice and see whether that really lifts your story up, whether it helps the listener meet a character in your story, even if it is through only one dialogue. The third D that I have for you this week is dynamic. It's a specific tip for all those who hold on to their stories very dearly. If you are a storyteller, learn to be in a dynamic state of mind. To be dynamic is to be open to playing with the form of the story, with the structure of the story, with the words of the story. It is to be open to playing with a story every single time you tell it. Never hold on to a story and never tell it in one rigid way. In fact, you should be able to restructure your story, reword it, and tell it to different audiences. Remember, every listener is different. Every group of listener is different, and they are differentiated by their behavior patterns, by their listening patterns, and their expectations of you when you are telling them a story. So whether it's the same story, you should be able to tell it to them in a different way every single time. Learning to be dynamic is also challenging yourself to explore the boundaries that you have as a storyteller. Can you challenge yourself to really stand on your feet, or quickly working out the story in your head and telling it in the precise way that it makes a lot of difference? That's all I have time for this week on ABC of Storytelling 2.0. I hope you're having a lot of fun, and I hope the series is insightful to you. I know it can get a little overwhelming because there are 26 letters in the alphabet, and you have to go through them one by one. But I am with you. This is a social learning experiment, and I want you to get better at storytelling, and I'm with you on this journey. So no matter where you are, wherever you're listening to this video from, join us in our Telegram group, share your stories with the community, and watch and listen to some other stories and give your feedback, because that's how a social learning platform really works. You help somebody better their story, and somebody will help you better yours. That's all for this week. I'll see you next week. Until then, happy storytelling.